So we're both in therapy. We've been pretty open about that, but a big reason that we both go is because we have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, if you remember from a previous episode, I said, if I'm not feeling anxious, I'm not feeling anything at all.
And that will be coming on a t-shirt soon.
Coming to you soon.
Yes, Pug Productions will be issuing that, but it's something that even though we both joke around about it, it's actually something that's really impacting our health and it's impacting our well-being. And one of the things that my therapist has certainly pointed out is that if my anxiety level is up at a higher level, it makes it harder for my base for me to get down to a lower base. So we're just trying overall to lower my anxiety to I hate to use the word normal, but to a better base for myself. So that way I'm not operating always on high alert and just, being anxious as fuck all the time.
Well, and I know that stress is a universal human experience, yet how we experience it differs from person to person. And I remember the reason why we kind of like focused in on this topic was because you had a court case and I had a demanding client and we were just operating at max capacity. I mean, we had no time to ourselves. And I remember just having a panic attack. And I think I called you. And I can't tell you the last time I actually had a panic attack where I was hyperventilating. And I just realized I was like, okay, something's got to give. Something's got to change here. And I think that's when we're like, let's focus on, we can't be the only ones suffering from anxiety or, being in chronic stress. I mean, others have to experience it. So why not just talk about it openly on the pod?
Yeah, talk about it here and, come up with some tips and other things so that way you guys get the benefits of things that maybe have worked for us or things that we're trying out. So that's really why we brought it here. But it is something that impacts us in many, many different ways. And the main thing of it is, why is it important for us to manage our stress?
Well, when I was putting together my show notes, I was very surprised to learn that stress impacts every organ and every system within your body. So, when we're talking about your I'm going to mispronounce this, musculoskeletal system, which involves your muscles, and I think you've talked about it before. So then, when you're stressed, you typically tense up your muscles, right? You can clench your fists and
Clench your jaw.
yeah, and so, you'll tense up, but then once that stressor has passed, you'll typically relax. However, if your muscles are taut or tense for long periods of time, this triggers reactions within our body that promote stress-related disorders. And what I mean by that is like tension headaches, which you've mentioned on the show, migraines. For me, I hold my tension in my shoulders and my neck, but some people can also experience it as lower back pain. Respiratory. This one I found to be very interesting. So it does impact your respiratory system. Here, we all like breathing. Do you like breathing?
It's something I do unconsciously. I like it so much.
Well, if you've ever been stressed or anxious, you might notice that you have a shortness of breath and rapidly breathing. I think I mentioned earlier that, I had a panic attack and so I was hyperventilating. So for most people that's fine. I mean, it isn't a problem, but people with pre-existing conditions like asthma, COPD, or even chronic bronchitis, it can actually exacerbate your breathing problems. So I have asthma. And so I definitely noticed that when I had that panic attack, it was definitely harder for me to breathe. Again, here is another one that I found to be super fascinating, which was the cardiovascular system. So our respiratory is increasing when we're stressed. But what I didn't know is your body is going into that fight or flight mode. And so when you are increasing your respiratory rate, what your body is doing is it's actually constricting some of the capillaries and arteries in your body and helping basically push most of your blood to your muscles so that if you need to take action and run, you can. But because your body or your heart is beating faster due to your increased heart rate or your increased breathing, and it's pushing, this blood through your body, it can actually, over time, it can basically weaken blood vessels and arteries, and it can increase, high blood pressure and all of this. So when you're stressed out, this can really cause damage within your body, which I didn't really even think about how it was impacting my heart. But I mean, you hear about people that work high stress jobs that just croak over from heart attacks. And this is why.
Yeah, this is a big part of it. And is there another system there? Because I want to talk about how cortisol plays into all of those systems.
I did. And that, well, so you can go ahead and talk about it, but what you're referring to is the endocrine system, the nervous and the endocrine system.
Yeah, well, so cortisol is the primary stress hormone that we have in our bodies, right? And so this gets secreted in the body. And what it does is it causes sugar to increase in your bloodstream. It increases your heart rate, like you just talked about, elevating your blood pressure, and boosts your energy in case you do actually have to escape from that bear, right? It's doing all of these things. The other thing that it really does is it blocks all non-essential functions.
I read about that and I was super fascinated by it.
Yeah, and it is something that I've read about it, but I experienced it recently. So when we're talking about non-essential functions, basically your body's like, we need to survive. And because of that, your digestion's going to shut down, your reproductive system, your growth, anything else that isn't important for you to live is going to shut down.
Well, some of the ones that I came across were like your hearing goes because it's non-essential. You get tunnel vision. You hyper focus on whatever it is because you need that increased concentration. So they were talking about whenever you're high stressed, and they said, think about whenever you've been stressed and you've tried to maybe insert a key into a door, or you've tried to dial someone's number and you can't. And it's because you actually lose some of your motor skills when you're in that high stress, high anxiety state.
Yeah, it's amazing that this happens, but like actually experiencing it. I've read this stuff before, and recently I came home and the side gate to my house was open. The last time I came home and something weird had happened, we'd had a break-in, and this was many years ago. So the reason I know that I went into fight or flight is because I really had to pee. Like that was really what I needed to do. It was like, I'm going to go home, I'm going to grab this real quick, and then I'm going to head out and I'm going to, go do something else that I wanted to do. But as soon as I thought my safety might be in jeopardy here, like I backed the car up. I didn't even go into the house. I called the police. And I didn't even go investigate in the backyard. I was like, nope, I'm not doing shit, because last time something similar happened. The house was a mess. There were all these things like, and you never want to interrupt a potential burglary in process because you don't know what those people could have. Right. And I went into fight or flight because I no longer needed to pee. I was no longer hungry. Like my whole focus was, I need to just keep an eye out, look out to see what is happening here. And then finally the police showed up, and as they checked everything out and everything was good, then I physically felt my body relax. And then I was like, hey, remember that whole thing where you needed to go pee? Yeah, we need to do that again. And I was like, oh shit. My body did the whole thing. I went through this whole, fight or flight in real time. And I don't think I'd ever consciously observed it before, to the point that I can now say, oh, that was a real difference of coming down and making sure, okay, no, we're safe, everything's fine. And now, okay, your systems are back online.
Gosh, when my system comes back online after an extended period of time under stress, I am exceptionally fatigued. I'm so incredibly tired because, either I'm holding my body tense, or, my body's releasing cortisol, and, I had that spike in blood sugar, but now it's down and now I'm just depleted. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think especially after the mental stress that we go through with the type of work that we've engaged in, at times it can definitely add to that, which I really think is the heart of what we're talking about here. Is we're in chronic stress, right? Like the potential burglary was a fight or flight type situation, but our jobs get us into fight or flight. Our parenting, if you're a parent, our interactions with our spouses, anything that creates this lack of safety will really get us into this mode. And so now, we're in modern times. We don't have to necessarily, hunt for our food or worry that, coyote is going to come out or a cougar is going to come out and kill us or anything like that.
I mean, sometimes,
like, I've been hiking and there was a bear around, and that was a little bit, freaky, but it's by and large, we have all of this mental stress that we have to deal with, but our bodies don't know the difference.
And we've talked about, the body keeps the score before, and just, our body really does tally everything, because one system that I didn't talk about was the gastrointestinal system. So, if you've ever had butterflies in your stomach, or if you're nauseous, I just learned that that's because stress affects and disrupts the communication between the neurons in your gut and to your brain. And so this triggers abdominal pain, bloating, nausea, IBS, just poor. And it actually affects your digestion and what nutrients your body will absorb. So you can actually malnutrition because of stress. And so I was reading, and according to the American Psychological Association, it's not so much what chronic stress does to our bodies, but what continuous activation of our nervous system does to our bodily systems. That's what becomes problematic. So it's that continuous activation of what stress does to these different systems within our body that can cause, long-term harm.
And that makes sense because we no longer live in a time where you're not going to have any problems. There's always been problems. You're going to continue to have problems. It's how you manage them and how you learn to live with the stress that you have that's going to really give you that impact of, is this a good stress for me that's going to get me a little bit motivated, or is this something that is going to give me long-term health problems?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because there is a benefit to cortisol, right? So that boost in energy helps me, for example, when I'm trying to meet certain deadlines for work, because, that certain stress gives me that little jolt of energy I need to finish that project. But again, kind of what you're talking about is, these extended periods of time, this chronic stress is just wreaking havoc on your body.
Completely, completely. So what can we do about it?
Well, I mean, how have you experienced it emotionally before we get into like the tips? Like, how has stress impacted maybe your mental well-being? Because I know we talked a little bit about the systems, but let's like look at the brain and our well-being for a second.
I think for me, how it's impacted my well-being has been with definitely with high anxiety, with overthinking things to the point that um, I will make something bigger than what it actually is, because I'm overthinking and stressing about it. I think that that's certainly come in. And I think the other part of it is I've been really shitty to myself because of it. I've been super hard on myself of, beating myself up over something because of being in that tunnel vision and only seeing the worst possible outcome and not allowing myself to step back. And so I think that there's been many different ways that, I've spent countless hours in therapy working on to make sure that I am managing those moments, but really those high mental moments have led to me crying, panic attacks. I mean, even I would say I was wrestling with a core belief last year, and I was home by myself. Nobody was around, and I was like literally shooketh. I was shaking on the ground, crying in the fetal position, because I was mentally fighting myself, and my body was reacting with it, and it needed to come out. It needed to happen, and then it was like, oh, okay, and then I was able to finally calm myself down and realize, oh yeah, I probably need to make an appointment.
So I used to call that my semi-annual purge. I mean, it would just surface at random moments. And I remember turning to Vince and saying, I need to excuse myself for about 30 minutes. And I would just like cry, like that good, like, like deep guttural cry. And then afterwards, I was fine. And I was like, that's probably not healthy. So again, that's kind of when I was like, probably should make more appointments with my counselor. So I was able to kind of work through that. I think for me, how I've kind of experienced stress, or how it manifests itself for me, is hyperarousal. And no, that's not sex. At first I read that and I was like, ooh, tell me more. No, it's actually difficulty falling or staying asleep, or
Yeah.
experiencing restless nights.
Yeah. If you have chronic stress, it's going to impact your sex drive
Oh,
in the
yeah.
negative way.
That is very true. But for me, my hyper arousal, I have trouble sleeping. And because I have trouble sleeping, I am literally dead throughout the day. Even before we started recording here, I was telling City, I was like, I feel like I need to tape my eyes open because I'm having such a difficult time staying awake. But because I have lack of energy, it impairs my cognition, my attention span, my memory. I'm in constant brain fog is what it feels like I'm operating in. I also, because I do have IBS, because again, stress manifests itself. And if I'm stressed out, I'll get a flare up with my IBS. But I have an eating disorder. And when I say that, when I say I'm an emotional eater, I know that some people, when they're stressed out, they will turn to food to eat or to kind of like, to cope. Exactly. Thank you. For me, because I get super nauseous when I'm anxious. The fact that food does not appeal to me at all, so I won't eat. And so I didn't think that I was an emotional eater, but Vince was the one that pointed out to me that, you know what, by not eating, that's also emotionally eating. So I was like, huh. So that is, I hadn't thought about it that way, but he's right for the one time in his life.
Oh, Vince has been right more than once. We'll give him more credit than that.
But I also picked up harmful habits. So I did, smoke for a period of time. And that was because I was extremely stressed. And that was a way for me to release that stress. And, because of lack of sleep, had these eating disorders. I was smoking. I mean, it led to depression. When you talk about these highs and lows that earlier about, your anxiety is always up here and we need to bring down it to the base. To me, that caused depression. When I was in like those low lows, it was hard to get out.
Yeah, and I mean, really, it's like I want to not have such shifting moods, right? And be able to recognize, oh, okay, this is stress, and then consciously move to doing things to de-stress myself if that's something that needs to be done in that moment, right? It could just be, hey, I'm in a high stress situation. I need to get myself out of it to feel safe. And then I can start applying some of the things that we are going to talk about.
Well, what are some of the things that you've done to help you deal with your stress?
Well, before I get to the ones that I'm going to suggest to people, Harvard Medical School suggests these ones. And I kind of want to go through them mostly because everything you read about de-stressing out there is going to talk about these things. And they may or may not work, but I feel like it's the canned answers. And so it was like, stay positive, meditate, exercise, unplug, find ways to de-stress, quote unquote. And this is a direct quote. Simple things like a warm bath, listening to music, spending time on a favorite hobby. Like,
the way that you're reading them is exactly like how I'm interpreting it because like this is bullshit. Like,
exactly.
it's bullshit.
It's bullshit. And it's like, yeah, we know how to do those things, but what are like actual things that we can do to get ourselves out of this? Because I swear every single article I read about de-stressing techniques all basically fell in these things. Now, these items are sound advice, but when you're in the middle of it, like I remember having a paralegal and I'd be like, just breathe. And she's like, if you tell me to breathe one more time.
You did do that a lot.
Yeah. Well, I like breathing because it's an easy technique that you already have with you, and can access very quickly. However, I do understand that a lot of this advice, even from, the fancy places like Harvard, are fucking just annoying.
You know how much they probably charged someone and just been like, you just need to learn how to breathe better. Oh, well, fucking thanks, man.
Yeah, just meditate for 1 minute. It's like, no, you need to find ways that work for you. And so here are the things that have worked for me. Walking has always helped me, whether it was doing, a longer 1 hour walk that I do, or I would grab my headphones and go for a walk, provided that the law firm I was working at was not in a super sketchy neighborhood. If I could go for a walk with one of my emo songs playing, like, oh, that was just perfect. Because we think in the moment, I don't have time to take a break, but you do. You absolutely have time to go for a quick walk, even if it's just around your building, long enough to get you moving. That always seemed to be a technique that would help me.
I'm kind of going to dovetail off of that because one of the ones that I came up with was like literally walking away from what's causing me stress. And so I think I mentioned earlier that I called Siria up and I'm like hyperventilating and just, at my weekend or my wit's end. And I said, okay, I'm turning it off. I actually turned off my computer for the day and I just was like, I'm done. I had to walk away, and I went outside, and I was only outside briefly for 5 minutes because it was super windy, but it was enough just like getting out of the space to just like, I noticed that my breathing went down, the tension that I was feeling, my body went down, my heart rate went down, my nausea subsided a little bit, but it was just like almost immediately. And it's just walking away from whatever is causing you stress.
That's a great tip. I love that. Walking away, because guess what? It's still going to be there. You don't actually have to finish it that day, and there's usually going to be more room. But for whatever reason, we get stuck in our heads that this must be finished right now. And maybe you do have a deadline, but you can walk away, even if it's just for a little bit, to get yourself out of that environment. That's a great tip. So, the other technique that has worked well for me, especially when I am unable to fall asleep, is progressive muscle relaxation. And so what this is, because Melissa's giving me this look
I'm
of
like,
like,
well, what the hell is
what the
that?
fuck is that? Basically, what you do is you slowly tense up a portion of your body and then release it. And so you start
I
from,
don't know why I'm thinking about Kegels right now.
I mean, that could be part of it. So basically, like you start at your feet and like you would tense up your feet and your calf muscles, and you'd hold that for, a, a little bit. I do it for a couple seconds. You don't want to do this to the point that you like pull something or hurt yourself. And then you slowly like move up your body. So then,
I'm just laughing because I'm like, imagine like pulling something. You're like, I was just trying to de-stress and I've pulled a freaking hamstring, you know?
yeah, you're trying not to hurt yourself. And so there's a couple different ways that you can do this. But if you move up your body, up the different muscle groups, and tense them up and then let them relax all the way up to your face, where you like scrunch up your face and you tense that up, and then you do it backwards. And you do that a couple times, and that's actually going to help you fall asleep because you're doing this tensing and relaxing process. It's also something that I've been doing in the positive intelligence work that I've been doing, where the recommendation there is to tense up your whole body for 10 seconds and then let it all go. And just like you get really curious and noticing, oh, like what are my muscles doing and how are things tensing? I mean, sometimes you will tense things. You're like, I didn't even know I had a muscle there, but you can. So that's another one that you're getting from the Siria toolbox. What else you got?
I got exercise, specifically hiking, because, and maybe this is selfish, I love that my phone loses reception and I'm disconnected from the outside world. And I can just focus. And this is kind of what it's similar to what you're talking about with like tensing, because I see that as like a focused effort, like you're focusing on that particular body part and you're being present. So when I'm outside, I literally will focus on the warmth on my skin, the wind in my hair, the beauty that surrounds me, rather than all the stressors that are currently present in my life at the moment, which is nice. And so I really get that from being outside. But if I can hike, even better.
Yes, hiking and being in nature are so good for you to just feel better. I love being in nature.
I do too.
We need to go hiking.
I've been asking you for like 3 years
I know,
now.
I know. So another technique that I've got here is box breathing. Yes, I was going to bring breathing because
Of
it's
course you
super
were.
easy and something that you can do. But let me tell you what box breathing is. It's basically you do it for 4 counts, where you would breathe in for 4, hold it for 4 seconds, let it out for 4 seconds, and then hold for 4 seconds before breathing again. And so you do that, and the way you can do that, and this is on our YouTube video, I can show you. You would count for 4, and you just kind of make a box, and then you'd bring your hand down for the next 4, then across to make the bottom of the box, and then up again. That's why it's called box breathing. So you can do that all to a count of 4. And it's actually pretty cool because Navy SEALs use this to intentionally bring their heart rate down. And it has been known to just really just get your whole system to slow down.
I like that. I like that. I mentioned earlier that I was having problems with sleeping. And one of the things that I did last year was I'm like, okay, because my mind is racing, I'm thinking about emails and, things that I didn't accomplish or finish in the day, that it was really keeping me up. So I started listening to audiobooks like on overdrive. So before I would go to bed, I would turn off all the lights and I would literally just focus on this book It allowed me to focus on one item that wasn't related to work or life or any of the stressors. And it was nice because not only was I in a more relaxed state, but it allowed me to fall asleep more deeply, and which was something I wasn't able to do before because I would literally stay awake for hours just trying to mute all the nonsense that was going on in my brain.
To audiobooks.
Yes.
One and sole focus. No multitasking with the audiobook, right?
Nope. Nope.
Nice.
You can't. You can't. That defeats the purpose of the audiobook, in my opinion. So, or, typically what will happen, damn ADD, but it's like if I do anything else outside of listening to the audiobook, then I'll forget what I just listened to. And then I have to go back and figure out where I stopped listening and rewind. So it's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
Just the one thing. Right on. So one last technique that is actually a new one that I found while I was doing my research for you guys that I thought, you know what, this one's pretty cool. I would actually like this one because it gets you into all your senses. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And basically you name 5 things that you see. You then for 4 things that you hear, find 4 different things that you can hear. Then 3 is touch. So you touch 3 different things. 2 is you try to identify 2 different smells. And then 1, you try to identify 1 thing to taste. So engage all of your senses. So 5, see, 4, hear, 3, touch, 2, smell, 1, taste.
Are you actually putting something in your mouth?
You can, or maybe you just notice, what your saliva tastes like, or, I don't know. You might put something in your mouth.
I was like, I
I
don't
would
know.
drink water.
Or we're recommending stuff. Don't, be wise with what you put in your mouth, listeners. Use caution.
Always be wise with that. But what I like about this and why I wanted to share it with you is if you get into your senses, even for just as little as 10 seconds, that's going to get you into the present moment. So any one of your senses that you can focus in on when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm super stressed out right now. You know what? I'm just going to focus on what I'm looking at. Or I'm just going to focus on hearing something. Any of those things are going to get you back into your body and get you into whatever other techniques or things that you may need for yourself.
I know you said one last thing, but I do have one that I have used for de-stressing, and it might go against the norm because I know we're all talking about living with intention, meaning, and purpose and everything like that. And I'm going to say explore medicinal routes. And the reason why I say that was because this was really a last resort for me. I've tried so many things to reduce my stress levels and improve my sleep. I exercised, I went to counseling, ate healthy. I was pretty active socially, but nothing seemed to help my level of anxiety. And so I was speaking with my counselor about this, and she said, well, maybe you should start to see a therapist and discuss the option of taking medication. And I was super hesitant about taking medication because if you've listened to our previous episode where I talk about my endo and me taking birth control, I just have a negative experience with just taking medicine in general. So I really was trying to explore all other holistic methods prior to even considering medication. But at the start of the year, after, suffering from chronic stress for several years, I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to someone. Doesn't mean I'm going to take any pills, but I'm going to talk to someone. And so I met with a therapist and, I'm started off on low dose anxiety medication and a sleeping aid. And while we're still adjusting the doses on some of the things, I have noticed that I have more energy, that I don't binge eat like I used to. I'm more relaxed and I'm actually less quick to anger or like experience irritability. May believe it or not. It's actually true.
I do believe it. She's not snapping my head off as much. So
You're
there you
welcome.
go, guys.
But I just want to put that out there because I know that sometimes when we think of medication, there's like this negative stigma. But what I found is when I was telling my family that I was starting to explore medication and anti-anxiety, I'm like the last one of my family to actually go on an anti-anxiety medicine. And I was like, well, maybe this is like a genetic predisposed type of thing. But, sometimes our bodies, no matter how much we try, just operate below the baseline a little bit. And you need just like a little pick me up to, either fight depression, fight anxiety, help with sleep. And so I just want to put that out there as something to explore. I'm not saying, overdo it in any way. Just see what works for you. And, if medicine is it, don't consider that as a failure on your end. It's just maybe sometimes our bodies just can't operate the way we would like them to.
Absolutely. And sometimes you need that extra help. I mean, I think being on medications that you need, like I have high blood pressure. I take that because of the chronic stress in my life, right? There are other things that I could do to try to reduce that, to get off of the medications. But sometimes you need that help to just make sure that you don't actually, keel over and die anytime sooner, or that you're just having a better quality of life. So absolutely, medicine is an option. Talking with your doctor, going through all of that. And I'll leave you with this. If you find yourself constantly needing to de-stress and you've tried all the things and you've tried medication, it might be something where you need to look up and look at the situation that you're in, look at the place that you're in and that environment. And is this really a place that you want to stay in? What's the cost of you staying here? Basically, is the stress worth it?
That's it for this episode. Find Pivotal Moments HQ on Instagram and TikTok for all the BTS and sister-like banter you know and love. We want to thank our music director, Ron Johnson. This has been a Pug Productions podcast.